Warning, this show may be triggering for anybody experiencing gambling-related harm. Please watch cautiously. We speak from our experiences only. Please seek professional help for a gambling addiction.
Hey, welcome to the Bet Free Life. I'm Christina, and I haven't placed a bet since March of 2021.
And I'm Brian, and I haven't placed a bet since July of 2014. Christina, how's your week in recovery going?
Honestly, it's been a little bit up and down this week. I've been kind of like feeling, I'm going to be honest, right? Been feeling a little heavier lately, a little bit off. And I'm not sure. I think sometimes the pressure of like hitting like monthly marks, like 8 months, just the pressure sometimes of, am I going to make it to 9, and then everything that I do in recovery, I work recovery so much every day that sometimes it does get a little bit heavy. But I just, I'm fortunate to have such a great community around me, great support system around me. And so I reach out and I ask people how they're doing, and they ask me how I'm doing, and I'm honest. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in recovery is to be honest about how I'm actually doing. Because sometimes we just get into this mode where we're like, I'm fine, everything's okay, smile. And sometimes it's just not. And it's okay to tell somebody that. It's okay to ask somebody just to talk if you just need to talk. So doing that, I feel tons better. I've reached out to some people the last few days, and, I have a great support system, and I'm feeling a lot better. So how's your week been?
It's been good. I did a couple of podcasts, and then I go to group therapy, I go to one-on-one therapy, and I went to 2 gambling meetings this week, which I haven't done in a long time. So I've talked a lot. So I'm ready to cap it off with tonight. And
Yes.
Tonight, I'm excited because we have an affected other as our guest tonight. And for anybody who doesn't know, an affected other would be the person affected by the gambling that wasn't the gambler. So it could be a relative or a friend, a coworker, or in tonight's case, a spouse.
Yeah, we have Kelly with us tonight, and her husband was the gambler. And so what's been so lovely about Kelly is how she's kind of introduced me to recovery for an affected other. And so, hi, Kelly. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Thanks for doing this.
How has your week been in recovery?
I had a good week this week. But as I'm finding, every week is different. Every day is different. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. But just trying to take it day by day.
And I think that's similar, like when I was talking about my week in recovery, you have those good days and you have those bad days. And you were a lovely guest on my podcast a few months back now. I think you were right at like 5 months, or broaching 5 months. And you opened my eyes to the whole world of recovery for an affected other. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your story and how that came about for you?
No, not at all. So it was about 6 months ago now. I basically, I had found out about my husband Steve's gambling. I found out in a pretty crazy way. It was just basically something I had stumbled upon, but I knew that this was not his first. At first, let me just say, I didn't know it was an addiction at first. Before I met him, I knew of his past addictions. He had an addiction to, drugs, alcohol, and everything. But, he was clean when we met. So as much as he was open about that, I myself have never struggled with addictions. I've never been around it. So I wasn't too knowledgeable about it. So I just basically figured he moved on from it. He recovered and everything was fine. So about 3 years ago, we've been together 11 years now. So about 3 years ago, I found out that he was gambling. He was basically just doing fantasy sports and stuff like that. I basically, I came upon it through looking at his credit card statements. He had gotten a credit card just because we were looking into buying a house and stuff like that. So at the time we were living with his parents, so it was a very stressful time. When I saw all these charges from, I think it was DraftKings back then, I questioned it. I was like, what is DraftKings? I've never heard of any of this. What are all these charges? So he kind of told me about the gambling and stuff like that. And I basically just said, well, stop it. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? We're trying to save for a house. We're living with your parents right now. Like, what is going on? Back then, looking back, I was not in my right mindset. I myself was struggling just because we were living with his family. We had 2 small children. So living with family is not easy. So my eye was basically just on the prize. Like, we need to get out of here. We need to do whatever we need to do. So I just shut it down. I was like, just stop doing what you're doing. I was mad at him for like a couple of days, but then that was it. I got over it pretty quickly. In the back of my mind, I wondered if this was a relapse. But I shoved it aside because I was not mentally prepared to deal with any of that. So, fast forward 3 years, we buy our house. We've been living in our house for about 2 years now. And, I found out once again about the gambling. So now this time around, I'm like, okay, we have a problem. So the night that I found out about it, I was destroyed. I had no idea. Are we going to lose our house? What is going on? My first focus was of our children. Are we about to lose all of our stability? So, and it's funny because thinking back now, he was not himself for probably, I wish I could pinpoint how long he was not himself. He wasn't the man I married. He kind of shut himself down. I kind of felt like there was always something there that he wasn't telling me. I felt like, I never knew what it was, obviously, but I just always felt like I didn't know what he was doing. I just felt like there were so many secrets, and I myself suffer from anxiety. So I'm just like, well, you're just being crazy. My brain tends to run off into all kinds of different areas. So I'm like, it's just you being crazy. But then the days leading up, like the day before I found everything out, it was like my body felt it before I knew what was going on. Like, I was literally like, I was at the dinner table. I was like, all right, something is going on. I don't know what's going on, but there is something. And he just kind of kept denying it. He's like, it's nothing. You're just being your same old self. There's nothing going on. And I had to walk away from the table because our kids were there and I didn't want them to see any of this. And I'm like, my whole body just started shaking. Like, I'm like, my life is about to explode right now. I don't know what's coming at me, but there's something big that's about to hit me. So I found out about the gambling. I was actually right in front of his mother when I found everything out. So she literally saw me, I was having a mental breakdown right in front of her. So that night, like, I basically just left my kids with her. I went home, I tried to drive to Long Island because I was on such an adrenaline rush. I had to just get away. But then I turned back around. I'm like, you know what? I need to find everything out from him. He needs to tell me everything. I have to figure out if I'm losing the house. So when he got home, he didn't get home until about after midnight from work. And I basically just sat down with him and I said, let's talk about everything. You need to tell me everything. I need to know how far we're in. Where are you getting this money from? You need to tell me everything. So he told me, he admitted the gambling because obviously I knew about it already. So it's like, you can't lie about it anymore. But it took him the course of several days to tell me everything. So literally with every passing day, I would feel like I was getting a blow to the gut. It was like I kept getting sideswiped because I thought that I knew everything, but then something else would come out. And I'm like, God, how much more is there? Like, there's only so much that I can handle right now. So at the end of it, I just, I took over all the finances. I'm a stay-at-home mom. So, that was one of my struggles with everything, is basically telling him, you no longer have access to our money. I'm opening a bank account where all of the money that he makes will be directly deposited into this account that he will not have access to. I have one debit card, he doesn't. And I basically just give him a weekly allowance, and I take care of all the bills. I take care of our mortgage. I make sure everything's paid, which that was one of the things that made me angry, because I was like, now I'm feeling the pressure of having to deal with worrying about the bills. And I feel like I'm doing all this by myself. And his one thing in life now is just to work. And now everything falls on me. So I was getting a lot of pressure there. It's gotten better though. So yeah, it's been an emotional roller coaster these last 6 months for me. Like I said, I have my up days, I have my down days. Luckily, I have the support of my sister, who, she's there for me whenever I call her, because if I'm feeling a certain way, she's been great. She's had her own struggles with things, so she kind of understands me. And I was able to find a Gam-Anon group. So I go every week, and they're really helpful, just listening to other people's stories about it. It's really helped me come along. And I actually plan on going back to school for psychology. After speaking with my therapist, I find it amazing what my therapist has done for me and for Steve, and just the way he touches everybody's lives the way he does. So I'm looking to go back to hopefully one day become a counselor or a therapist. I'm thinking about doing it with addictions. We'll see where it takes me, but I'm excited. So that's kind of where I'm taking my recovery.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I just want to say, as a fellow stay-at-home parent and somebody who has anxiety, I feel you. And that stay-at-home parenting is tough. And so, wow. What kind of gambling was Steve doing?
Fantasy, basically, sports fantasy. He was on DraftKings, he was on FanDuel. Basically, it started when he had been doing this for a while. His best friend used to run fantasy leagues and stuff like that. But I think he would pay I think it was something like $70 for the year or something like that. And they would do draft lineups and stuff. I don't know too much about it. I'm not a sports person, so I don't really know too much about it, but that's where it started. So I think he won something and just thought that, well, this is great, I can keep winning. And, it just kind of spiraled from there.
And before you found out about his gambling, when he talked about fantasy, or when you had heard about fantasy, would you have considered fantasy gambling? Because some people hear fantasy and don't think of it as gambling.
No, I honestly, I never did think of it as gambling, but it's funny because looking back now, there was at one point he was doing something with his friend, a fantasy thing with his friend. And I remember, again, this is way before I knew of anything. I remember feeling angry. Like, he told me that I think it was like an $80 thing. He gave his friend $80 to do this fantasy thing. And I just remember an angry feeling. I was like, well, why didn't you tell me that you were doing that? I had no idea you were doing it. And he was like, well, I do it every year. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm so angry about this, but I'm angry about it. And I think that was last fall. So thinking back, I'm almost wondering, again, could it have been my body that knew something that my brain didn't? I don't know, but I never knew again, I'm not into sports. I did not know what FanDuel was. I never knew what DraftKings was. I didn't know what any of that stuff were. So I never really thought of sports betting as gambling.
Intuition's an amazing thing. It's like when you just know something's coming. I have that feeling too a lot. And I think too, when he was in his addiction, and you say that he was a different person, can you go a little bit further? Was it just not being present? Was there, gaslighting and kind of like, like when you would say those feelings, like, I know something's going on, and would he try and convince you otherwise? Or would it be like, how did those kind of things really play out in your conversations?
Well, no, he never, I wouldn't call it gaslighting, but, I never told him too much about the way I was feeling. Like, again, he was very distant. That was the main thing I had noticed, was he had become very distant. He always had his phone on him. And, we would drive to Long Island, which was a 4 or 5 hour car ride, and I would be driving and he'd be on his phone the entire time. So I'm like, maybe instead of being on your phone, let's talk. Like, you're at work all week. And then, but again, I just always thought that this is me acting like the crazy spouse. This is just my anxiety. This is because, for all I knew, not like to sound in any way, but my brain was always like, is he cheating on me? So I'm like, that just sounds very insecure. That sounds crazy. Like, I know he would never do that. But, it was almost like, it would almost be the things I would tell myself. And I never knew how to put a name to my feelings, I guess, before my therapy and stuff like that. So I would just have all these feelings, and then I would just try to I would just try to get on. Like, I would get over it, like move on with it, just whatever, just tell myself I'm being crazy, and that's it. The only time that Steve tried to manipulate the way I was feeling was the night before I found out, because I was telling him, I know there's something going on. Like, you need to tell me what's going on. And he just kept saying, no, there's nothing going on. There's, I don't know why you're acting this way. So that still to this day kind of upsets me a little bit, that he did that. Because again, like, I automatically think that I'm crazy, I'm anxious, I'm, I have all these feelings that I shouldn't be feeling. But yeah, he was distant with me. He was distant with the kids. And it's hard to describe. It's just, he was never angry. He never showed, being angry, but stressed. I guess he would be more stressed out, and he would kind of like, he would get angry over things he normally wouldn't get angry about. Like, if the kids were doing something, if they were acting up in a certain way, he would lose his temper more quickly. And I'm like, well, it's not that big of a deal. Like, normally the person that I met, 11 years ago, like when I met him 11 years ago, he was so positive about life. He had just done 9 months in his own recovery and things like that. So it was almost like he was on this high of life. Like, I had never met a more positive person. So, I just basically chalked it up to his stresses in life. He's got a lot of pressure. He's the only person in this household making money, and it's a lot to have to take care of 4 people. And with just buying the house and stuff like that, he's just got to be under a lot of stress, and work was very stressful. It still is stressful on him, but he's doing better with it. So I kept trying to find other reasons why he was the way he was. And because I didn't know. So, that was a hard time to go through with him. But again, now he's completely different since going through his recovery and stuff like that. He's happier. He's more open. He tells me everything. Even the things that he used to not feel comfortable with, he now talks to me about, and he's very open. So it's better.
Kelly, I had the privilege of interviewing your husband, Steve, on my podcast, and episode 239 for anybody who wants the companion to this. And he's a lovely, lovely human. But that's why it pains me to ask this question, but how does he rebuild the trust with you after what happened?
Well, that's the one thing, we don't have that fully. That was the hardest thing to lose, was the trust in our marriage. And I still sometimes have days where I question, how am I ever going to get through this? Because, me personally, I've always been a very open person. I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve, so I can never have secrets. I can't ever, you know how I'm feeling. He always knows how I'm feeling. So, you know, that was the hardest thing, because I'm like, with everything you hid from me and the lying and the deceitfulness, how am I ever going to move on from that? And it's a struggle. It really is a struggle every day. And, you know, the trust is not there. And he knows that, and he understands that. You know, that's one of my setbacks, on my down days. I'm just kind of like, on days where I'm questioning, what is he doing? If something happens at work, like if he tells me I'm going to be home at such and such time, and I don't hear from him because something came up, my brain starts to spiral, because the trust just is not there. And, this is something that I've talked to my therapist so much about, is how do people survive this? Do people survive not having any trust? Because that, for me, as I'm sure for many other people, that's the number one thing in a marriage. You need to have trust. And to me, trust and stability go hand in hand. So in a sense, I feel like I lost my stability a little bit, but I'm also learning how to stand on my own 2 feet. So the way that I deal with not having trust is that I just kind of tell myself that I'm stronger now than I was 6 months ago. And, my relationship with Steve is very strong. We have a very strong relationship, thank God. So I do think that we can get through this. It's going to take a long time, I think. But eventually, I think that we will get there. It's not easy, though. It is not easy every day. It's me and myself. I have to kind of like talk myself through the certain things, when things pop up randomly, I have to say it's fine. This is normal. Everything I'm feeling is normal. I try not to be too hard on my feelings, as I try not to be too hard on him, because at the end of the day, I am choosing to stay with him. I'm choosing for many reasons to stay with him. So this is what comes along with it, and I'm accepting that, I'm accepting that this is who he is, and I still love him for it. I mean, the way that I think about it is that had he have not had his struggles, 11 years ago, I almost feel like we wouldn't be together today. So everything happens for a reason. He's doing everything he needs to do right now, as am I. He does his recovery, I do mine. And I'm almost grateful, because I've met a lot of people that are going through this, a lot of great people that I wouldn't have ever met. I'm doing a lot of things that I normally wouldn't have ever done. And it's been a growing process for me. It's been very uncomfortable for me, because I've had to address a lot of different things, but it's almost been more uncomfortable for Steve. And I give him so much credit for everything that he's gone through with his recovery. So it makes it a little bit easier for me, seeing that he's doing this, he's doing what he needs to do. And, do I ever think that there can be a setback or he could have a relapse? Yeah. I mean, it's always a possibility. It's always a possibility with anyone that doesn't have an addiction. So, it's no matter what, the struggles that I have, I feel like that's struggles in every marriage. What marriage is 100% stable? So, it's every day, it's an adventure every day. I'll say that.
That's how I feel sometimes too. I want to ask you, when you talk about all these emotions that you had and feeling like you were crazy, for lack of a better word, because you were having all these emotions, like, is he having an affair? Like, what's going on? I know something's wrong. When you stepped into recovery, you started talking with your therapist, you started Gam-Anon. Did you have that moment where you connected with these people and you had that realization that you were validated, that your feelings were validated? That was there that moment? Because I had that moment when I stepped into my first GA meeting. Like, I'm not alone. Like, these thoughts, these feelings, these actions, these behaviors I'm not alone. And that was one of the most amazing feelings I've had in a very long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I did. Well, the first meeting, my first experience in a meeting, I went to before I started Gam-Anon, I went to an open GA meeting with Steve, and I'll never forget this. There was a woman in there, and I don't know what she was going through. She must have been going through something, but it was so uncomfortable for me. So I was the only spouse that was there, but I wanted to be there because, again, I wanted to hear other stories, and I want to understand this disease. So when I went in there, everybody was very nice. They were very welcoming to me, but there was this one woman there that the way in which she spoke to me, it was almost like she made me feel like I was the enemy, that like she downright told me that I will never understand this disease. I will never understand what he was going through. I'm no matter how hard I try, I'll never get it. That's fair enough. That's 100% fair. I don't know if it was the way in which she used her tone or what, but she just made me feel like such an outsider. And like I said, like I was the bad guy. Like I almost felt like I shouldn't be there. So, I was almost like deterred from that. I'm like, I don't think I'm ever going to another meeting ever again, because I'm like, I don't even know what to say. But that almost drove me more, because I'm like, you know what? And Steve actually even said this to me too. He was like, honestly, I don't even think us as people with addictions understand it. Can we really explain why we do what we do? Like, we don't understand it either. So how are you going to understand it? Again, I think it was just her tone, but, I have been trying so hard to really, and now, I have a completely different outlook to people with any type of addiction. Now if I see somebody sitting on the side of a road, that clearly needs help, I see that person in a different way. I see them as somebody that is struggling with life, that they've, something either happened to them or just something is going on with them to make them be this way. And could I say that I fully understand? No, I will never fully understand, because it's never something I've gone through. But, I like to surround myself by people that have the addiction, as well as people that are affected by it, because to me, it helps me more. It helps me more in my recovery, to know that this wasn't done to me out of manipulation or out of, because he felt like hurting me. It was the opposite, at least in Steve's case. His whole thing was never feeling good enough about himself and wanting to do more for us, financially, and him trying to give me everything. So, and we've come to find out that he's, a lot of this is linked to things happening in his childhood. So it's been hard for him to address those things. So, I feel like people now that are struggling with addictions, it's very uncomfortable for them. A lot of people, they're not ready for recovery because they're not ready to basically unearth everything going on inside of them, so, but the women in Gam-Anon, they have been nothing but wonderful. I mean, their feelings, the things that they say resonate with me so much. I've gotten some of the Gam-Anon books, and reading so much of it is so helpful, giving yourself over to a higher power and stuff like that. It's hard to do, but just realizing that you can't control situations and stuff like that, it's a struggle, but it helps a lot. It helps a lot with my emotions, and, listening to other women's stories and other people's stories. And, they'll say some things and I'm like, oh my God, like I would think the same exact way. They'll bring up certain situations, and there was a woman that actually just hit her 44 years in Gam-Anon, which I think is incredible. She's been going it for every single week for 44 years, which is amazing. And another woman is 26 years in. So I think it's great. Something I've learned is that you can't put a time on your recovery either. The person that has the addiction, and the person that is, the affected spouse or the affected person. you're both in recovery together. And yeah, so I keep going on tangents, I feel like, with your questions. I'm sorry. So
No,
No, it's
good.
great. Yeah, this is what we want. We want you to share and your experience. And I think another thing to kind of add to that is it's good not to compare your journey to others too. I think, sometimes that can mess us up a little bit if we start comparing our journeys to. This is what I have found in recovery. If I started to compare my journey to somebody else who maybe was further along in recovery or maybe doing recovery a little bit different, I found that it discouraged me some. Did you come across any of that?
I mean, there may have been a couple of times where it's funny because I don't compare myself to the other people in Gam-Anon. I was actually comparing myself to Steve in his recovery. You know, with how far along he has come and how happy he is, and I'm very happy. I'm so proud of him. But I was almost putting pressure on myself because I'm like, I'm not recovering that fast. Why am I not recovering this fast? So that was something else that I had to talk to my therapist about and just say, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's unfair because again, I'm so, so happy for him. But I'm like, here I am, I'm stirring in my feelings and, he seems to be doing wonderful. So, but I've learned that his recovery is his recovery. My recovery is mine. And it may take me a little bit longer to get there than him, which is fine. I'm so, so glad that he is where he is. And I'm so happy for him. I really am. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. I would always be happy when I would hear of somebody else's recovery in a good way. I think it's great because to me, it's like, well, that's wonderful. If they're able to get to where they are, I can get to where I need to be. It's kind of like an inspiration to me. So yeah, I'm happy for, people that are doing so well in their recovery.
Kelly, what has the positive impact been on your family since you and Steve both started your recoveries? Have you noticed a difference in the dynamic?
There is. Oh yeah. There's so much of a difference, there's a difference in myself, a huge difference, because during this entire recovery, I have learned a lot about myself, the pressures that I put on myself and the pressures that I've put on Steve, unknowingly, and the pressures I put on my children. I've always had these expectations, I guess, or just not even expectations, but, just with anything, if I'm looking around the house and the house is messy, I'm like, why can't I get myself together? Like, I have 2 children, that's why, but I would put so much pressure on myself that the house always needed to look nice and that, my house, like things need to be a certain way, or Steve needs to be a certain way, or he needs to be doing something that, something different, or my children, if my kids are acting like kids, well, why are they acting like kids? Why are they not acting like what in their right mind would make them think to do that? So I've kind of learned to slow down, stop putting so much pressure on everybody, learning to accept things for the way that they are more, and I mean, 6 months ago, I don't think that I would have ever had this mindset in me, to just try to take a deep breath, appreciate everything in life. And even Steve, everything has changed about him. He is so much more open. He's just, he's like back to the person that I met 11 years ago. And, our kids feel it too. We're taking more time, we're enjoying them more. We're enjoying life more. We're taking more family trips. We're doing more than what we ever did before. And Steve and I are closer. This has brought us together so much more than I ever thought possible. I mean, I always thought that we were very close, but, we're talking so much about our recoveries more. We're connecting more. We go see the same therapist. So it's it's funny. I think it's great that we go and see the same therapist. So, we always reference things that he tells us, and it's helped our life dramatically these last 6 months of going through recovery together.
That's so great to hear. You talk about your kids and how you're more present in their lives. I know Steve is more present in the lives. My question is, do you feel comfortable as your children get older about talking to them about addiction, and bringing that conversation up with them when they get older?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We plan on. So when I was younger, my dad did struggle from addictions. He was an alcoholic growing up and stuff like that, but it was never discussed. So that was why when I said in the beginning, I never had experience with addictions, I guess because I was so young, it was never really explained to me. Like nobody ever sat down and said, this is what's happening here. This is what's going on. Because had they have done that, I feel like I would have been in a much different place. Even 3 years ago, when I first found out about what was going on with Steve, I feel like I would have done something different. So yes, I do. When my children are old enough, we do plan on having these discussions with them. And I'm happy because if they're ever struggling, they're going to know that they can come to us and that they can talk to us and they can lean on us because, we're not just going to shut them down. I feel like this has helped me become more open-minded with that too, because had this not have happened and down the line, they may have their struggles, I wouldn't have known how to handle it. And now I feel like Steve and I are in a much different mindset. And plus we're very open with them in general, so even just talking when Steve's on his meetings or if I'm on my meetings, we're sometimes within earshot of them. They're not going to understand this now, but I hope that one day they will. And, my biggest thing is I want to educate them on as much as possible. So I think it's really important to have these conversations with them.
Well, thank you so much for your open and honest approach to all of this. Thank you for sharing everything you just talked about. I think it just helps people to hear even the specifics of Gam-Anon, because people think, oh, do I want to go to that? Is that something I want to go down? So thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Are there any other resources that you've come across that have helped aid you in your journey that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
No. So like I said, I highly recommend a therapist. I believe we found our therapist from Brian. I think Steve's mentioned where I always forget where we found him through the New York Council. Yeah, there's just basically that, and Gam-Anon has helped me.
I love therapy.
Therapy is great.
That was the whole reason that I started the podcast. Was because it was a free way to do therapy. I just got to talk to somebody else about my gambling addiction for an hour each week. And so I think it's just so valuable to be able to lean on somebody else and let your feelings out without judgment.
Whether you're struggling with addiction or not.
Yeah,
whether you're struggling with any type of mental health issues or just sometimes just day-to-day life. It's great to have somebody to talk to about that. So again, we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. This is The Bet Free Life. Check out Christina's podcast, check mine out, and we'll see you next week.
Welcome to